Hey folks, today we're going to have a discussion about 7 financial mistakes that wealthy families make, okay? And I'm going to let you decide what wealthy means to you. That's a rather relative term. So to one person, wealthy might mean something else. Compared to another person, it might mean something totally different. So I'm just gonna jump right into the 7. Before I do that, I have to give the disclosure that this is not investment tax legal advice. This is merely education designed to help you on your wealth journey, whether that's someone building their wealth, whether you're into retirement already, whether you're a business owner. This is just designed to add clarity to that financial picture, all right? So always discuss this with your financial advisor, with your tax professional, with your estate attorney, people that you trust in your corner. Now let's jump right into the first item, and that is going to be over concentration into one asset. Now, asset here can be fairly general. I can give you a few quick examples of over-concentration that we've seen in terms of being what's known as over-concentrated, having too much money into one position. The first always comes to mind as just a stock, right? So Apple, Google, Tesla, a lot of the most successful stocks, most successful companies over the past decade have given some people hundreds of thousands and even millions of dollars in what's known as capital gains. When this happens, of course, it's good. You always want to have, of course, appreciation from any investment that you have. But as you know, this is going to come with a tax liability if you were to sell and take the benefit of that appreciation. Another example I always use is a business owner, okay? So we normally estimate that about 80% of a business owner's family's wealth is tied up in their business, right? And the reason is that businesses can be very illiquid. And all I really mean by that is it's not as easy as you run a business, you want to look at retirement or you want to look at selling your business, and then you flip the lights on and you can sell your business tomorrow, right? It takes a long time to get that business sold. There's a lot of businesses that actually don't have the capability of being sold because the business owner is really the business as a whole. And that's something, for a conversation for later. But those are just a few examples of over concentration into one specific asset. Of course, the danger here or the risk is if I take that same example, if one of those companies has a very poor year, or if some malfeasance pops up in their company and it drops very significantly, well, I just lost a lot of my wealth because of the event of one company, maybe even one event, right? For some reason, the thought that's coming to my mind is several years ago, Chipotle, of course, had an E. coli outbreak. Their stock dropped tremendously. And a lot of times we're hoping that these positions recover, but that's not always the case depending on the holding that you have. On the business side, of course, if something were to happen, as I mentioned, to the business owner, or if something happens in that given industry, that could change things very quickly as well. So there's just a lot of risk that's on the line when we talk about concentration, when we talk about being too much into one asset. And that's really the first thing that's going to come to mind here in mistakes that we see wealthy families make. And I'll give the disclosure. I know anytime financial advisors see a position that that someone's over concentrated, and the first thing we want to do is diversify them out of it, right? And that's not always the right answer as well. It's not simply as clear as just a blanket fix of we're going to diversify this into the S&P 500 and we're going to move on, right? That's not always the answer because, as I mentioned before, it's great if a certain percentage, a certain company appreciates very strongly. It's great to reinvest into your company. In fact, a lot of business owners feel that they have the most control over their company. They know how the operations work. They know everything that's going on. So if you're someone that has, of course, a significant portion of your wealth tied up in your business, or if you have a significant portion of your wealth tied up into a very strong company like Apple, Google, Amazon, of course, these probably aren't going anywhere anytime soon, so it's not like you have to ring the fire alarm and make a decision today. It's just something worth noting that as you get older, it is important to think about having a conversation around diversifying a concentration into one asset. Okay, so now let's get into number 2. And I promise the next 6 will go by faster than that one. That's probably the most important one, so I wanted to spend the most time on it. Number 2 is going to be no coherence in terms of the advisors that you have on your team, right? So a lot of wealthy families, of course, have a CPA. They might have a business manager if they have a business. They probably have an estate attorney, a defense attorney, all the legal staff. They have a financial advisor, maybe several. And really, it's a bunch of, I'll call it wise or smart advisors kind of running in their own circles, right? So they might all have a bunch of great ideas. They might all be sharing these ideas and suggestions with you, the person that's running your family's wealth. And when you hear 3 or 4 different opinions, if you think about it, it almost gets more confusing than if you would have sought out none of their advice in the first place, right? So what normally I like to see is one person. Selfishly, I always think the financial advisor has the best overall view of the financial plan. But so long as you have one person that sort of is the quarterback, I don't like to use the word quarterback. I don't see Tom Brady in here anywhere, but somewhere to take the lead charge of your financial plan, someone that's able to collect sort of the overall opinion and come to you with one suggestion rather than 4 or 5 that might even be different from each other, right? So that's something important to think about as well. The third is going to be no structure for the children or for the heirs, right? And we've all heard before that if you give a child wealth too early in their life, it's going to ruin them, it's going to make them spoiled brats. And to tell you the truth, that's not always true. In fact, a lot of times we see wealth passed on for several generations through the same family. You see a lot of businesses, take Chick-fil-A for example, we see a lot of businesses continue family governance and family ownership throughout the generations. So there's a couple of important pieces there though. The first is going to be financial education, right? So someone has to have the education to understand what's expected of them before they're given the reins or the wealth in this case. And the second piece is they also have to have the experience, right? You have to have experience in order to do something. I remember back when we were taking a bunch of financial exams several years ago to get into the industry, it was all well and good to be able to write it on a piece of paper, but it's much more when you sit across from someone and have to clearly explain it to them. So that's something to think about as well, is education and experience are going to be critical for the heirs or those that are designed to take over the wealth next. The second kind of piece here, or I guess third, is being able to have trusts, being able to have structure in place that's going to either incentivize them or have control over their spending, right? So we've seen children get passed on $500,000, $1 million, and go through $100,000 a month the first few months they have it. And the reason why is they don't have the education or experience, and then they don't have the guardrails in place or the places, the blocks to keep them in place. So that's where a revocable trust, an irrevocable trust, that's where your estate attorney comes into play. Being able to incentivize them to do certain things, right? If you go to college, you get this. If you start a business, you get this. If you want to buy a house, you get this. Or even if we think of other ways that a trust could be used, it's just merely age-based or having a lot more control over what they're able to do with that wealth. Fourth is going to be unclear estate planning. And what I mean by that is a lot of folks, by the time you amass a lot of wealth, we hope that you may already have a trust in place. Normally you go from having a will to graduating to have a trust. But from here, it's important to remember that just after you finish your trust, you're not graduated from estate planning, right? And we're not estate planners, but there is an importance to updating your estate plan, right? Life changes, divorces happen, people get sick and pass away. There's a lot of unforeseen events that pop up, or you might even want to just include someone as an heir. A lot of changes come up right over your life. I don't necessarily have to explain that piece, but it's important to remember to keep estate planning clear and be able to keep it updated, right? So if we keep it updated, we take care of the examples I just mentioned, and keeping it clear avoids a lot of family issues after death, right? A lot of times we have a plan in our mind and we know how we want things to be after we pass away, but our estate plan is our opportunity to have clear control and communication over how that's going to be perceived after we pass away. And the earlier you can communicate this to your family, and everyone has their own family and they have to decide when to bring the family into the conversation, typically the better and more smooth adjustment it can be after, of course, the head of the family passes away. Fifth is being overloaded on real estate. And I'm a financial advisor, so we don't necessarily advise on real estate, but I personally appreciate real estate. There's a lot that a wealthy person can do through real estate that they can't do in the public or sometimes even private markets here on the investment side. And that is a lot of things to do with, of course, tax benefits. There's certain benefits I can take from a tax standpoint with physical properties that I just simply can't through stocks, bonds, and of course, like I mentioned, private funds. And then of course it has the tangible factor to it, right? So I look out the window here and there's several office buildings, right? And there's people that own these and there's people that have cash flow and there's people that depend on building their wealth based off of that cash flow in these buildings. So real estate can be a very strong tool for the right family. The only thing to consider is, similar to earlier, I said too much concentration into one asset. You kind of double down here because I have a lot of concentration into one asset. And at the same time, this is a very illiquid asset again. So if I take that office building over there, it's not as simple as I'm going to go put that building on Zillow, someone's going to buy it, and I'm going to get paid the next day, right? It's a very complicated and long process to sell a building, sell a piece of real estate, and there's always a lot of different factors that come into play if you want to do a 1031 exchange. Again, real estate advisors are great at getting that conversation started. But being over-concentrated into real estate is another one that I see in particular. And as I mentioned, I do appreciate real estate, but it's just something to keep in mind. The 6 is going to be shiny object syndrome. And what I mean by that is once you get past a point of having to just have all your bases covered, okay, I have my investments in the public stock market, maybe even have a little bit of private and alternative investments, and I have my house, I have everything that I need from a normal investment standpoint. Then I move on to more private investments. I move on to real estate, as I just mentioned. I might be in hedge funds. There's several things that I'm now involved in that I'm in because of the level of my wealth and because I don't need that liquidity, right? I don't need my money back tomorrow, so I can dish it out to go invest and hopefully give me more return over longer periods of time. But we do need to be mindful of just chasing something because it's new, because it's attractive, because it's got a great marketing scheme, right? There's a lot of IPOs, there's a lot of angel investments out there, there's a lot of new things that you could go invest money in, but it doesn't have the background or the history that might be advisable to invest in. So a lot of times this is just as simple as not making a mistake. Charlie Munger often says is you just find a good idea. In fact, let me actually steal that quote real fast. There's an old 2-part rule that often works wonders in business, science, and elsewhere. Take a simple, basic idea and take it very seriously, right? So a lot of times if we just have one simple, basic idea and we just do it better than everyone else for a long period of time, history has shown us that that's worked pretty well. Okay, the 7th and final, and maybe the most important, or one I see a lot, is overcomplicating taxes. Now, thank you for staying with me this long, and I do appreciate it, but overcomplicating taxes is as simple as looking for something that's out there that you're missing. Because the truth is, if you have a CPA, if you have a business manager, you probably have a lot of very smart people on your staff that are currently already trying to look for anything that you're missing in terms of taking a tax benefit from your financial plan. So if you can rest assured in that, a lot of times you're covered. And we have to remember that the IRS has a lot of smart people on staff, right? They have people with a legal, with a tax background, and they are looking to cover all of their bases. So when people look for loopholes, and even if they found a loophole, it's really just something that the IRS is probably incentivizing you to take, right? So if I talk about life insurance, IRS, the government, they want you to buy life insurance because they don't want people dying and having to have their families depend on them for welfare programs, right? So that's why they have the tax-free benefit. What else? 401ks. So when I invest in a 401k, of course, I can defer those taxes to the future. So what do? They incentivize you to invest today. They give you that benefit of tax deferral into the future, and then you pay the tax in the future, right? So looking for the golden nugget out there, turning over every rock to see if there's something you're missing, a lot of times turns into a second job. That's another thing I forgot to mention on the real estate piece. A lot of times real estate investments can also turn into a second job as well. And most of all, when you have your wealth built up, you've really earned a release of stress, right? You should remove stress from your life, not too much because you still want to have some fulfillment, you still want to have some purpose, but that's an important part to think about here. So that's it. I appreciate you staying this long. If you have any questions about this video or about how we plan to avoid these mistakes, help avoid these mistakes, feel free to shoot me an email. If you have any further feedback that you'd like to see on future videos, you can send that as well. But thank you so much for your viewership. As always, guys, I will see you next time.